I took the night shift at a local self-storage facility because I thought it would be easy money. Quiet nights, minimal interaction, and no real work aside from doing a round every couple of hours to make sure all the units were locked. Most nights, it was exactly that, just me, my flashlight, and the buzz of the fluorescent lights inside the tiny office building. The facility was pretty large, maybe over 200 units spread out in several rows with long corridors between them. Everything was automated. Customers entered their access code at the gate, drove to their unit, loaded or unloaded, and left. My job was just to sit, watch the monitors, and log anything suspicious. For the first couple of weeks, it was uneventful. I'd bring a thermos of coffee, put on my headphones, and kill time with podcasts or reading. The cameras showed nothing but still, quiet corridors all night. Occasionally, someone would come late to drop something off, but nothing weird. Until it started. The first incident seemed like a glitch. Around 3:17 a.m., one of the motion sensors triggered in Unit 139. I checked the monitor, but the feed was completely black, as if the camera wasn't working. I made a note and figured it was a sensor error. But then it happened again the next night. Same unit, same time. This time I walked out there with my flashlight. The door to 139 was closed and padlocked. There was no sign of movement, no strange sounds. I knocked, just to be sure, but no response. I shrugged it off and went back. But that pattern kept repeating. Always at 3:17. Always Unit 139. On the fourth night, I checked the logs. That unit hadn't been rented out in over a year. No recent access codes entered the facility. It should have been empty. I decided to check the inside. The next day, with the help of my manager, we opened Unit 139. It was completely empty. Just a bare, concrete space with dust on the floor. No boxes, no furniture, no trash. Nothing. We shut it back up, and I tried to move on. But that wasn't the end of it. A week later, I noticed the feed for camera 6, covering a different corridor, would flicker every night between 3:15 and 3:20. Not off completely, just brief static like interference. Always at the same time. One night, I was staring directly at it when it happened, and in that moment of static, I swear I saw something. A figure standing motionless at the far end of the hall. The image was distorted, and when the feed came back, it was gone. I replayed the footage again and again, but it was corrupted, like the figure never existed. The weirdest part? I started hearing things, not through the speakers, through the walls of the office. Faint knocks, as if someone was tapping from the other side of the drywall. One time, it sounded like whispering, but when I leaned in, it stopped. I considered quitting, but I needed the money. I told myself I was imagining things, that fatigue was messing with my head. Until one night, the alarm for Unit 143 went off. Unlike 139, this one was rented. A man named Marcus had it, mostly for old furniture and business inventory. When I got to the unit, the lock was on the ground. Not broken, just placed there. The door was open. Inside, everything had been pulled out and rearranged like someone had been living in it. A single chair sat in the center, facing the door. A notebook rested on the seat. I picked it up hesitantly. The pages were filled with numbers, names, and dates, scribbled repeatedly over and over. Some pages had the same phrase written dozens of times. Don't open the door. I turned to run back to the office and nearly screamed. The lights above flickered violently, and I felt a rush of cold air pass right through me. I sprinted the rest of the way and locked the office door behind me. The monitors all showed static. That night, I stayed locked inside until sunrise. When the day staff arrived, I handed in my badge and walked out without a word. I never went back. A few weeks later, I got curious. I searched online for anything about that storage facility. Any rumors, old news, anything. I found a forum post, over a decade old, talking about Unit 139 and how someone had gone missing there in 2007. A man who'd been storing belongings after a divorce. He stopped showing up for work and was never found. The last ping from his phone came from that very facility. I still don't know what's inside that unit or what I really saw, but every night at 3:17, no matter where I am, I wake up in a cold sweat. And sometimes, I swear I still hear the knocking. It was around 11:30 p.m. when my car's fuel gauge started blinking. I was driving alone down Highway 46, a road I rarely took and one I now wish I never had. The highway stretched for miles through empty fields and thick patches of woods, with barely any signs of life. I had passed a small town earlier in the evening, but by then everything had been closed. My only option was to keep driving and hope I'd find a gas station before running out. To my relief, a flickering neon sign appeared in the distance. It read, "Open 24 hours. Fill up fast." As I pulled in, the place looked like something out of a movie. There was a single gas pump, an old convenience store with a few dim lights inside, and not a single other car in sight. I stepped out and began fueling up. The air was still and cold. The wind didn't even rustle the leaves. It was like time had paused in this place. Inside the store, a man stood behind the counter. He looked to be in his late 60s, thin and pale, with deeply sunken eyes. He didn't say a word as I entered, only nodded slightly. The radio behind him played static with brief bursts of unintelligible voices. I grabbed a water bottle and some chips and approached the counter. When I got closer, I noticed a thick scar running from his jawline up to his temple. Still, he said nothing. He rang me up and slid my change across the counter without making eye contact. "Quiet night?" I asked, trying to break the silence. He looked up at me then, his eyes dead and unblinking. "You shouldn't be here this late," he said. I laughed nervously. "Yeah, I'm just passing through." His response was barely a whisper. "They come out after midnight." I stared at him, unsure if he was joking. Before I could ask, he turned around and walked in the back room, leaving me alone in the store. The static on the radio got louder, and I suddenly felt like I was being watched. I left the store quickly, got into my car, and locked the doors. I had filled up already, so I turned the ignition and began to pull away. That's when I saw it. Something was standing at the edge of the woods, just beyond the gas station's light. It was tall, easily over 7 feet, thin and gray-skinned. Its eyes glowed faintly, and it tilted its head as if studying me. I froze. It didn't move. I blinked, and it was gone. I looked around but couldn't see it anymore. With my heart racing, I sped out of there, keeping my eyes on the rearview mirror. The road was empty. I drove for nearly half an hour before I dared slow down. Then I saw another gas station, except it wasn't another one. It was the same one, same flickering neon sign, same single pump, same convenience store. I slammed on the brakes. This couldn't be. I hadn't turned around. I had driven straight, non-stop. I hesitantly pulled in again, needing to make sense of what was happening. The old man was still there behind the counter. This time, he was staring right at me, like he had been waiting. "You didn't leave," he said. "I did," I snapped. "I drove for miles." He shook his head. "They brought you back. They don't let people leave." I backed away and ran out of the store, jumped into my car, and tried my phone. No signal, no GPS. When I looked up, I saw movement at the edge of the woods again. But this time, there were 3 of them. Same tall, thin figures. Same glowing eyes. I floored the gas and tore down the highway. I didn't care where I was going. I just needed to be away from that place. Eventually, the highway led me back to the small town I had passed earlier. I banged on the door of a diner until someone answered. An older woman looked at me, clearly alarmed. "I need help," I said. "There's something at that gas station down the road." Her expression darkened. "You saw them." I nodded slowly. She opened the door wider. "Come in." That was 2 years ago. I never drive at night anymore, and I never take Highway 46. But sometimes in my dreams, I see that flickering sign, and I wake up to the smell of gasoline. I got a job maintaining an old lighthouse on a small, isolated island off the coast of Maine. The gig sounded like a dream. Easy pay, complete solitude, and a scenic environment to clear my head. After the year I'd had, solitude was exactly what I needed. The lighthouse hadn't had a full-time keeper in over a decade. Technology had made most of the job automatic, but there were still occasional maintenance issues that required someone physically present. My job was simple. Stay for 6 months, monitor the equipment, log reports, and keep the place in working condition. The boat dropped me off with enough supplies to last a few weeks. I was told that the supply boat would return monthly with food, water, and any essentials. After a quick rundown from the previous temp keeper, I was left alone. Just me, the gulls, and the ocean. The first few weeks were peaceful. I spent my time reading, writing, walking along the rocky shore, and enjoying the haunting calls of distant foghorns. At night, the lighthouse beam swept across the sea in a comforting rhythm, and I found the isolation oddly therapeutic. But around the third week, I started noticing things. The first oddity was sound, a knocking sound. It would come from the outside wall, usually around 3A. I assumed it was just birds or the wind at first, but it was rhythmic. 3 knocks, then silence. Always 3. Then the logs started to change. I checked my daily reports and noticed things written that I hadn't recorded. One morning, I found a single line scribbled at the bottom of the page. He comes when the light goes out. The ink was darker than my pen, the handwriting nothing like mine. The light never went out, though, not until the 5th week. There was a violent storm that lasted for 2 days. Lightning, crashing waves, wind like I'd never heard before. At some point during the chaos, the generator failed. I scrambled to fix it, fumbling in the dark with soaked fingers, but it took hours. The light was out for at least 6. When I finally got it running again, I returned to the logbook. Another line had appeared. Now he knows you're here. I barely slept after that. I started hearing whispers echoing up the spiral staircase. I'd walk past the lighthouse windows and catch shadows that didn't belong. The radio began picking up strange frequencies. Voices speaking in a language I didn't recognize, looping over and over. The same 3 words. Every single night. The knocking came back, louder, more aggressive. I try not to look out the windows, but curiosity always won. Each time, nothing was there. Just black ocean and moonlight. Until one night, I saw him, far down on the rocks, standing motionless. A tall figure, impossibly thin, no features I could make out. Just staring at the lighthouse. Staring at me. I backed away, heart pounding, and stayed away from the windows. But when I turned around, the logbook was open again. A new line had been added. He waits below. I considered calling for help, but the radio was now static. My cell had died days ago, and there was no signal on the island regardless. I was completely cut off. One night, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Slow, deliberate. They stopped right outside the door to my room. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I watched the handle twitch once, twice, and then go still. The door never opened. By morning, I found nothing. No prints, no signs of forced entry. But the logbook had another line. Open the door. I lasted 2 more days. When a supply boat finally came, I didn't wait. I ran down the hill with my bag, yelling at them to take me back. I didn't explain anything. I just wanted off that island. A week later, the lighthouse was reassigned to someone else. I didn't follow up. Didn't want to know what happened to the new keeper. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear 3 knocks on my apartment wall. Always 3, then silence.